Hi everyone, my name's James Peacock and I run the Anne Boleyn Society on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And today, on the 483rd anniversary of Queen Anne Boleyn's execution, I would like to talk to you about the key things that I feel should be most remembered about Queen Anne Boleyn. Now, I obviously have a very invested interest in Anne Boleyn, so I will try not to go off on too many tangents, okay, I promise. So if I do at any point, I apologise. But anyway, let's start. So the first things I'd like to mention are things such as Anne's determination and dignity. For example, she refused to be the king's mistress. Now, this gets misconstrued as Anne being calculating and scheming, but I actually think this is quite courageous of Anne. You know, we have to remember the 16th century was not a world where women had the power really to do that, so she was challenging that really. And we don't know, therefore, if she ever said to the king, "Make me your queen instead," which are words that often gets put into her mouth, but that's another story there I won't go into this time. But this is something about Anne that is incredibly courageous. And in fact, courageous is another thing I'd like to mention, because the way she faced her end, particularly when she was in the tower, you know, those last few days must have been, no one can imagine it really, how she must have felt. And it's incredible the way she faced down her enemies at her trial. Her speech she gave is phenomenal. I would I cannot suggest highly enough that people go and research that, because look it up. You'll find it online. It is incredible and is such. Reading that, you just cannot help but admire her really. But also courageous comes, you know, for a number of other things with Anne, particularly in regards to her enemies, with people such as Thomas Cromwell, who described her as having intelligence, spirit, and courage. Now, he's the man that many believe brought her down, and he was describing her as having those three things after her death. So that's quite something there. Another one is the Imperial Ambassador Chapuis, who understandably wasn't a huge fan of Anne Boleyn. You know, he naturally was more inclined to favour Catherine of Aragon, who he was very close to. He described her as being braver than a lion. Now that is incredible, I think, really there. So courage is something that Anne had in abundance, really. Particularly if you look at how many enemies she had. You know, she's seen as the classic other woman, and a lot of people did not like her. Who was this woman who came from no royal birth or anything, who suddenly captured the heart of the king? She managed to face down all her enemies throughout her life, throughout her time, and that is quite something, I think, there really. But other things such as Anne's her loyalty to her family, she looked after those in need. You know, she helped her uncle, Edmund Howard, Catherine Howard's father, find a position when he was in poverty. She looked after her sister Mary's son Henry and gave him a great education. That's another thing that sadly gets misconstrued with Anne. You know, other things such as she gave aid to those in need on the continent, people who were interested in the reform. She was a keen advocate for the Reformation. That's something that often gets very overlooked. You know, she had her chaplains going about the continent, bringing back banned books, as it were, because she was so interested in learning and reading about these things. Again, you know, another story in particular is when she was staying at Sudeley Castle in about July 1535, she sent two of her chaplains to Hales Abbey to investigate a supposed holy relic. When that was found to be not the holy relic, the blood of Christ, as it was claiming to be, she asked the king to have it removed. So this is something, she took a real interest in the Reformation, and sadly that is completely overlooked really, which I think is a real shame, because she was a keen starter of the Reformation. She promoted people like Thomas Cranmer, William Latimer, etc. She promoted these men to high position at court. They were in her circle. This is something that gets fundamentally quite overlooked or ignored from people, really. And I think that's something that is probably one of the strongest things that I feel quite strongly about there, that I feel Anne should be most remembered for. Another thing is her wit and humour. During her last hours, when her execution was delayed, and the Constable of the Tower, William Kingston, was trying to comfort her as best he could by saying the execution would be very quick. As we all know, there was a swordsman coming from Calais. She replied with, "I have heard said the executioner is very good," before putting her hands about her neck and laughing, "and I have a little neck." That is something that's actually very dark, witty humour there. And that's the sort of humour I love personally. So that I always, whenever I read that, not only do I laugh and find that quite amusing, I also find it terribly tragic. The fact that she was able to, but also very courageous, really, actually, to, the fact that she was able to use that in her final moments, facing death, to make a joke about it. That is just incredible, really. Another thing with Anne, for her last hours as well, is she's joking with her ladies that she's going to be remembered as Queen Anne Lackhead throughout history, as Queen Anne Lackhead, sorry. Again, that is another incredible thing there, this witty, dark sense of humour that I just think is hilarious, but also very moving as well. That's something with Anne that I personally really admire about her. And I think that whenever I'm having a particularly bad moment, and I feel that many people, I've had many messages from people who tell me they feel the same about this as well. They draw on her strength at those times in the Tower, because it is incredibly remarkable. No matter what view you tend to take on Anne Boleyn, I don't think anyone can deny that courage is something she had so much of, and also coming into that courage is the dark, witty humour there, which is hilarious, and incredibly admirable, really. So it's things like that that I feel that should be remembered about Anne. She wasn't perfect, People tend to put labels on her. They want to label her. But what I feel most of all is she was a human being, someone who had this story that you could not make up at all. No one could make up this story. And writing a TV drama today, it's like something. It is like something out of a TV drama. Really, you forget that she was actually a real person because of this incredible story of this woman who's not of royal birth. She is of fairly noble birth. She goes off to have quite an incredible education, living on the continent and everything. And then, of course, she comes back to England and she challenges the norm of society at the time. She stands out because of her unique dress sense, but she also has this incredible wit and charm about her, which is an intelligence which attracts the king to her eventually, after having not noticed her for a few years beforehand. But then, when she's queen, she's challenging the role. She's acting quite, she's challenging the role of the Queen at the time. She's getting involved in things such as the Reformation. Many people say that she perhaps shouldn't because, she was a woman at that time, but we forget actually that she was crowned and anointed as a monarch, not just as a consort, but as a monarch. And in doing that, Henry gave her these sort of powers that, he probably never meant to have given her. But so actually, I wonder, was she actually behaving any differently, or was she actually really acting as in the role that she was given? And in that role, she acted incredibly wisely. I know that towards the end of the time, her days, words and things that she said were misconstrued, and perhaps she was a bit more, she should have been more careful of her words. But you know what? We can all look back and judge and say this should have happened, that should have, she should have done this or that. But at the end of the day, she was surviving in the 16th century world. She was no more ambitious or any better or worse off than anyone around her. So I do feel that she gets misconstrued quite a lot and labelled unfairly. And, but these are things that I feel should be most remembered about her, no matter what people's view is. Her courage, the way she faced her end, her determination and her dignity, how she wanted to preserve her honour, her interest in the Reformation, but also, most of all, her dark and witty sense of humour. You know, calling her, saying that she'd be remembered in history as Queen Anne Lackhead. I mean, how many people can say they would face their end like that? That is incredible, really. So anyway, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. I do apologise, but there are so many things that I feel should be most remembered about Queen Anne Boleyn, and people are welcome to contact me on either Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And if they want to have a further discussion on this, because I could go on forever, but you know, these are the key things that I feel we should most remember about Anne Boleyn. And let's not forget that, you know, I will repeat it again, you know, Chapuis saying she was braver than a lion, Cromwell saying she had intelligence, spirit, and courage. That's incredible, really. And I feel that's whatever people's view are on Anne Boleyn, no one can deny that she had those things in abundance. Now, I hope you're enjoying the collaboration between the Anne Boleyn Society and queenanneboleyn.com. Please do visit queenanneboleyn.com to read other articles that have been put together by a number of fabulous historians. They are well worth reading, and they are fantastic, all answering what they feel should be most remembered about Queen Anne Boleyn. I hope you enjoy, and many thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.